Okay, I'd like to call to order the public hearing on the budget for the Borough of the Watchung Borough Board of Education on May 6th, 2021 at 6 p.m. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To
to
the
the flag
of
of
the
the United States of
of
America
and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
for which
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty and justice for all. Okay. Welcome to a meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that the advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung at which formal action may be taken. This meeting is being conducted remotely using communication technology. Instructions for joining the meeting and participating in public comments have been posted on the district's website and sent to the Watchung Borough and the Watchung Public Library, as well as to the school community through an email blast. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda at points in the meeting provided for the public to address the board. Members of the public also have been given the option to submit public comments to the board secretary via email or written letter no later than 24 hours in advance of the meeting. Recording or photographing other than for private personal use requires the consent of parents/guardians whose children may be included in the image. May we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella,
Here.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Here.
Mrs. Harvey,
Here.
Mrs. Ingracia,
Here.
Mr. Kraft,
Here.
Mrs. Murad,
Here.
Mrs. Posehn,
here.
Mrs. Scharf,
Here.
all are present.
Are there any board member comments? I actually had a comment. I wanted to thank all of the nurses and the teachers. This is Teacher Appreciation Week and Nurses Appreciation. I wanted to thank all of them for just all of their hard work, especially during this time. You know, a lot of the times members of our community like that in those positions go unnoticed, and I just wanted to wholeheartedly thank them for all of their efforts and their service to the children in our community.
Amen. Thank you, Dory.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other board member comments, we're gonna move into the presentation of the 21-22 budget.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to limit my remarks to the budget presentation, but I do just want to first say it's been great having more kids in school at Valley View and also with for a longer period of time each day at Bayberry and Valley View. And it's been a very smooth transition thanks to the teachers and staff and to the families. In particular, I want to thank the PTO for providing volunteers to help out at lunch and for so warmly embracing our teachers and nurses this week for as well as our entire staff for Teacher Appreciation Week. So we'll get started with the presentation, and why don't we advance Mr. Pepe to that first slide where we typically begin with our vision statement. But before we get there, hold on one second. Let me just recognize the board members, our 8 board members, and in particular our Operations Finance Committee for all the hard work that was put in to make sure we could come together for a fiscally responsible budget for the 2021-22 school year. And so when we get to the vision, this vision is informed by our commitment to inspiring learners toward discovery and creative problem solving. It recognizes the importance of innate curiosity and inquiry and collaboration without losing sight of the joy of learning. Further recognizes the importance of acceptance and inclusion and the value of reflection and ethical decision making. And what this gives rise to is our culture of inquiry, equity, and collaboration. So we'll go to the next slide and take a quick look at some of the core components of that. The heart of it is student engagement, students as active learners in a student-centered environment and an authentic learning process. Some of the core beliefs include making sure that we are developing critical and creative thinking and communication and collaboration, ultimately having students work together to solve problems and try to improve the world. Right? We have at the core of it, the standards aligned curriculum, an instructional program, and always a safe and supportive learning environment. The next slide, typically we put together some data that we have regarding state testing and some of the high points and highlights that we can celebrate. We didn't have those last year. So what we did was we took a look at the way we have responded to the pandemic and reflection over the course of this year. We're proud of the way we were able to navigate this very unusual year. But really, I think the more important thing is we did it together as a community. We modeled for our students the importance of the very skills that we talk about, like critical and creative thinking and creative problem solving, in order to provide the kind of experience, the best experience under the difficult circumstances that we found ourselves in this year. But again, if we're committed to teaching students to be problem solvers, we have to model those behaviors for our students. Next slide takes us to the budget objectives and our main objectives. And this has been consistent in the 2 years that we've been doing this together as an administrative team with the Board of Education. One, we want to improve teaching and learning and align it with the district vision that I just outlined. We intend to improve operational efficiency and reduce expenditures. We, of course, made it a goal to stay within the 2% cap. And while that wasn't easy, we were able to accomplish that with a lot of hard work. And last, we want to balance the budget without decreasing fund balance. This current year's budgetary accomplishments, right, with the same overarching objective of improving teaching and learning and improving operational efficiency. We created a couple of special services positions that were previously outsourced. That included a behaviorist and a speech therapist that have been in place this year. Part of the reason we wanted to do that is we know we could get better service and provide a better experience for our students. And in doing that, it leads to stabilizing some of the special services costs that were still are high, but were very high when we took on the budget process in our first year. That continues to improve. The services we're providing also continue to improve. And what the real goal is to provide our students an experience in the least restrictive environment, meaning we want to keep them in our district and provide them in our inclusion classes, and because we know that that's what's best for the students, and we continue to work towards that. One of the key parts of that was the board establishing a position back in 2019 for a director of special services, and that continues to pay dividends for our students. We redesigned the preschool, added the creative curriculum, put in a full day model for our students and our certified staff member. And we've also taken steps to reduce the number of systems we had in the district. We moved to Genesis, not only for the student information system and database, but also for lesson planning, curriculum, and teacher evaluation. And another important accomplishment has been restructuring the technology support services. We've changed our support services, but more importantly, we've added a full-time position here in the district. So the key decisions to meet the objectives, we did a little bit more restructuring this year. One was to combine some positions in our music staffing, and we moved to 3 full-time employees from previously 2 full-time and 2 part-time employees. We also were able to restructure the English as a second language and world language staff position at Bayberry, and move to 1 full-time employee from 1 full-time and 1 part-time. We've maintained all other staffing levels, and we continue to focus on professional learning and collaboration because we know how important that is in terms of providing a good experience, good educational experience for our students. And then we have the budget timeline, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Pepe now, and he'll take everyone through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Alexis. Good evening, everyone. So from here on, we get the fun part for me, which is the numbers. Starting with the timeline, this shows you the different steps that are taken in preparing a budget, starting back as early as November, which is about 2 months earlier than we had started the previous year, and hope to start even earlier this year. This process starts with working with our administrators and teachers to come up with what we see as our needs, and then start working with the operations committee and the board to really get that down to a balanced budget, which we successfully did in March, submitted it to the county. The county approved that the budget we presented was fiscally responsible. And so now we're presenting it to the public and asking the board to approve it tonight to make it officially our budget for next year. You'll see the May 8th date for the user-friendly budget posted on the district website. That's a statutory requirement. It'll actually be up tomorrow. I'm not going to wait 2 days just because I can. It will be up tomorrow so that everyone can see. It'll actually be the advertised budget and a document called the printable PDF that has a whole lot of information for the public to view. Some key factors, things that are always considered when we're putting together a budget. We look at things like enrollment, at what resources we have, mostly meaning revenue resources. Really, our revenues come from 3 places: the local tax levy, the state aid, and federal grants. I have surplus up there because there's also a component of the budget every year where whatever extra money we had from 2 years prior gets included as part of our revenues for the current year. Things that have impacts on the budget, and we'll talk a little more about in a bit, are salaries and benefits, special education costs, and capital and security needs. A little discussion about enrollment. So this is one of the factors that we look at, is the enrollment trends. And this line shows a trend of the anticipated enrollment reported in each budget. It's not actual enrollments. They're close to actual, but they're not exact. If you look at last year, you can see 615 was our estimated enrollment. We started this year off in the low 600s, and we're currently at 620. So that was a pretty good estimate because we were right around that number for the entire year. Just based on trends and seeing numbers that come in at the low end and go out after, for graduating from 8th grade or promoting from 8th grade, we're anticipating a drop. However, since we are now at 620, which is more than we were at when this budget was put together, we may end up with more than 604, which would be good news. So here's the numbers part of it. The first column shows you Bayberry's numbers. The second is Valley View over the last 5 years. And then what we're projecting moving forward. So you can see that Bayberry, we're looking at a slight increase. Valley View, a little bit of a decrease. And that is mostly due to a large 8th grade class and a not as large 5th grade class coming in, 4th grade class rather, coming into 5th grade. One thing I want to point out that has a pretty significant impact on the budget is this third column, the out of district numbers. So if you look back 5 years ago, we had 1 student that was going out of district for services. That moved up to 3 in 17-18 and 4 in 18-19, and then up to 8. So this was going in a direction that's very costly. And so one of the things Mr. Alexis referenced was stabilizing special education costs. And so we're happy that for the 2nd year in a row, we have not added any new out of district placements in the budget. And we hope to not only continue that, but as some of these settlements see their way through and the students move on from the district, we can bring that number back down because that has a very significant impact on the budget. I'm not going to bore you with all of these numbers. Their presentation is there. You're welcome to download it from the website and look through these. But just basically, this shows you going through the years at each grade level. Same information we just talked about, broken down by grade level. And here's at Valley View, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The one thing you'll notice is that 8th grade in the current year, the estimated number from last year's budget was 78. This year, we're estimating 63, which comes from our current enrollment in 7th grade, moving up to 8th. So that's a pretty significant decrease, which explains why the numbers are going down. On the other end, where we had 71 students in 5th grade this year, we're only projecting 63 based on our 4th grade enrollment. So on both ends of that, where we have a high number going out and a low number coming in. This takes the same information and shows it in terms of class sizes. The top half is last year, just for comparison purposes. The bottom half is what we're projecting for next year. You'll notice that for the lower grades, we have pretty nice numbers in the low teens, mid-teens. Once we get up to 3rd grade, they all are in the 20s. Still not too high. It would be nice if we could bring them down a little bit, but generally speaking, we have decent class sizes throughout. And okay, so now the budget itself, let's talk a little bit about the numbers. For this year, for the 2021-22 budget, we have revenues totaling $13,614,785, as you can see. It broke down how much comes from various sources. The local tax levy, as you can see, is the far majority of that. It's actually 90.3% of the total budgeted revenues. The state aid, which I put a note here that says includes extraordinary aid. I just mentioned that because the extraordinary aid number is not a number we know, it's a number we estimate. And every year we estimate. For several years, we had estimated it lower, significantly lower than it came in. So for this year, I've increased what I'm estimated at. It's still estimating it lower than I think it will come in, but I made it a little bit closer so that this number is actually more than it was last year. Just because I'm estimating more accurately. So more importantly, what has changed, right? So these are just what the numbers are, but let's take a look at what has changed. We've stuck within our 2% tax levy increase, and that 2% equals $240,986. We had an increase of state aid of about $68,000, which is a 10% increase on our state aid, which sounds very nice. However, I would say that we still need more from the state. We currently get 90% of our budget from our local tax, and that even with that 10% increase in state aid, it's still only about 6% of our total budget. So we're going in the right direction there, but we're hopeful that the state will continue to move that up to a closer number to what it should be. This is the extraordinary aid increase I just mentioned. This is just an estimate. Last year, we estimated it low to be safe because I didn't want to have a budget that we couldn't fulfill if we didn't get a high level of extraordinary aid. So this year, I increased the estimate by $65,000, and that's still lower than what we actually anticipate getting. The rest are, just some miscellaneous revenues. The one thing I wanted to point out is the very last one, the budgeted withdrawal from capital reserve. So for the past few years, we've met our capital needs by taking money out of our capital reserve. And we're happy that this year, mostly due to the work that we completed in this current year and the year before, we actually did not need to take any money out of our capital reserve in this upcoming budget. Keep that in mind because that number is important when I get to some of the summary numbers. So here's revenue projections looking from local. We'll look at local, then state and federal, and then we'll look at the combined. From the FY21 budget, which is the current year, to the FY22 projected, increases and decreases are I think, tell the best story. So our increase, as I said, for the tax levy is 2% at $240,000, almost $241,000. Tuition from individuals, this is mostly made up from preschool tuition. We're not estimating an increase in this. We don't know. This is one that you don't know, but we are hopeful that we will see good numbers coming in from the preschool. And we've had a lot of interest so far, so we're heading in the right direction there. Miscellaneous revenues, it's just a minor increase. Here's that, again, the capital reserve showing that it's decreasing by 298,000. That's because we're not withdrawing money from our capital reserve this year as we did the last few years. And the budgeted fund balance has decreased. That's really just a number that's based on 2 years, the budget from 2 years ago. Every year, at the end of the year, the auditor tells us how much money we have to put into our budget in the following year. And so this is the number from 2 years ago. And 3 years ago, it was a higher number, so it looks like a decrease. Okay, revenues from state and federal. The state, as I said, is increasing, and here it's showing a 17.8% increase. Again, that's because I increased the anticipated extraordinary aid by 65,000. So we're really not getting 17% more. We're just estimating it at a more accurate number. And federal grants did go up by 13% because there's a lot of money out there right now in response to the pandemic. There's the CARES Act money. There's the second iteration of the CARES Act, which is called CARISA. There's the third iteration of the CARES Act, which is coming soon, ARP. And there's been other sources of funds through the state and county as well. So there has been quite a lot of federal money coming through between this current year and next year. And so just as a summary at the bottom here, we have the local sources, which is the total from the previous page, the other sources, which is the total from here, showing you our total projected revenues. And again, it shows a decrease of 0.001%, a decrease of $8,000. That's misleading because that's including that 298,000 of capital reserve that we're not withdrawing. So in reality, we really are increasing our overall revenues by about 290,000. This slide shows just a, the portions, so you can kind of get a sense of what makes up our budget. And you can see, as with every school district, we have the same general concept here. The salaries and health benefits make up 71% of our budget. Special education comes next at about 14%, and then that leaves about 15% for everybody else, for everything else, from transportation to facilities, technology, and all the other things that we spend money on. This comparison just kind of shows year to year. It's the blue bar is the current year, the red bar is the projections for next year. Most of the numbers go up slightly. The one that is interesting is the capital projects going down. And again, that's because we did not have to withdraw from capital reserve to do extra projects this year. And part of that is because of the direct install program we did this past year, which saved us a ton of money to get a lot of projects done at 20% of their cost. So that helped us to get ahead of what we would have otherwise had to do next year. All right, so some key increases. Talked a little bit about this from the revenue side. We'll talk about it from the expenditure side. Again, salary and health benefits, that's our number one driver. It's total increase when you use, you put in the 3% increase for the staff, comes out to about $250,000. If you recall, the local tax levy increase of 2% was $240,000. So that doesn't even cover the costs of just moving everyone up the salaries. So we rely, in order to be able to make the budget work, we relied on things like state aid increase, which we did get, and some other areas of efficiency, making sure that we're, keeping other costs stable or dropping them where possible. Health benefits increase. We actually had a pretty good deal this year. Our medical benefits only went up by 3% with Horizon, which was pretty good news, as we were originally anticipating about an 8% increase. However, it's still overall is increasing close to 6%, 5.5%. That's because of the state's legislation on the EHP and GSP plans. So now all new staff have to take this educator health plan, and it is in theory, it is a cheaper plan than what we would have had. So it should have saved money. The only problem is we had a very, very inexpensive plan to begin with. So it actually ended up not being that much less expensive. And at the same time, and this is great for the staff, but it really puts a strain on the budget. it significantly decreased the people who go into the EHP, it significantly decreased their contribution. So as a result, we actually had an increase in costs to the district. So the total is about 5.5%. And we had no dental benefit increase because we have a 2-year contract for dental. So the number we had last year is the same as it is this year. Special education did increase about 78,000. I think it's looking like from some of the things that have happened between February and now that we may actually save most of that through some positive occurrences, but we don't know for sure yet. So at the worst case scenarios, we've increased by about 78,000. For the size of the special education budget, that's a very small increase. And compared to the way it increased over the past 2 years, it's minute. It was really going up, up, up. As I showed you on the slide before, going from 1 out of district placement to 8 in a matter of 3 years really put a lot of strain on the budget. And shared services, this is just sharing some of the things we do to try and keep costs down, working with Watchung Hills Regional High School, working with Watchung Borough, using ed service commissions and cooperatives and state contracts, all ways that we are able to obtain things at a lower cost than if we just went directly to vendors. So that's that. Excuse me for a second. Sorry about that. So the budget summary, this just puts it all into one slide. This shows you at the top the revenues, the bottom the appropriations. And because we are a school district, there is no choice but for these two numbers to match. That's how we operate. We have to balance the budget. So when we don't have the revenues, we have to cut back on expenditures. So our final budget for the upcoming year is $13.6 million. I'm sorry, for last year, the current year is 13.6, right? For the upcoming year is 13.8 million, an increase of just under $200,000. Again, remember that that overall number is impacted by a few things. One is that significant increase in federal grant money that we're getting, and also the fact that we did not withdraw from capital reserve. So those two kind of work in opposite directions. And this is kind of an idea of how much our expenditures are anticipated to go up from one year to the next. And that's all of the fun budget stuff I have. And now the question that is on all of the taxpayers' mind, which is, how is this going to impact me as a taxpayer? So this table shows you a history of the ratables and the tax rates, and shows you on the bottom row what the increase is. Most importantly, what the bold row, what shows over here is your average assessed home based on the numbers we received from the borough. The average assessed home is assessed at $730,568. And for that home, the estimated school tax would be $4,890.26, which is an increase of $113.57. So for everyone in the audience who has a house that's worth exactly $730,568, you now know what your taxes will be. But for everyone else, I try to help you by giving you an incremental understanding here. So what it comes down to is, for every $100,000 of assessed value, the increase is going to be approximately $15.55. And this last slide shows you that in a table. So if you had a $100,000 house, your increase would be $15.55. If you had a $500,000 house, I'm in the middle of the table, your increase would be about $77.73. And for every 100,000 you go up, it goes up by another $15.55. And that is everything I have.
Are there any questions or comments?
I just wanted to thank the operations committee and the administration for putting this all together. I know it was extremely time consuming, and I just wanted everyone to know I appreciated and still appreciate everyone's efforts in this. So thank you. I guess that's the extent of of the
Okay.
comments.
All right, thank you.
I don't see any raised hands. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Pepe, for working so hard on this.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Rich, for that. Appreciate it.
I love numbers.
Okay, so we'll move on then to comments from the public on the 2021-22 budget and other agenda items. So we welcome input from the public. There are 2 times during the meeting when the public is invited to speak. The first opportunity to comment on agenda items only is now. The second opportunity for public comment is towards the end of the meeting. Total time allotted for public comment is 30 minutes. Before you make your comment, please state your name and address. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 30 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by a participant to 3 minutes duration. Our public forums are not structured as a question and answer session, but rather are offered as opportunities to share input with the board. In instances where the board feels a response is needed, the presiding officer or superintendent will address the comment. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel or hiring in public session. Names of students should not be used. Mr. Pepe, can you please read your statement for recording of this meeting?
Members of the public should consider their comments in light of legal rights of those affected and identified in their comments, and be aware that they are personally legally responsible with potential liability for comments that they make to the board. The board shall not be held liable for comments made by members of the public. So at this time, if anyone from the public would like to speak, please click the raise hand button and we will allow you to unmute your microphone.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So we're going to move along. And Adam, can you please move the budget item?
I sure can. Where are we? Let's see. Yeah. Operations and finance.
It's the
Oh, but yeah, I
the
see.
adoption,
A1.
yeah.
Yep, I gotcha. I move A1, adoption of the 2021-2022 budget.
Is there a second?
Second, Joe.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Mrs. Posehn,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, there's no administrative item. So Michelle, can you please move the personnel item?
Sure. Move the following items. B1, approve school psychologist leave replacement.
Is there a second?
Second, Adam.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Mrs. Posehn,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Rich, can you please move operation item?
Yes, I move item C1, authorize certain actions in connection with a proposed school facilities project. C2, approve addendum to transportation jointure with Watchung Hills Regional High School.
Is there a second?
Second, Adam.
Is there any discussion?
Yes, I have a comment. This is Michelle. At first, I'd like to thank DRG, the administration, and the members of the operations committee. It's evident that a lot of thought and consideration went into what was months of work and consultation. I appreciated their outreach to the remaining board members for feedback and providing the opportunity to tour the schools and to understand the proposed referendum further. Their fiscal commitment is apparent. While I sit on the board, I am simultaneously a taxpayer of Watchung, and I don't take lightly the ask this would pose to our community. I'm also a parent, and I take very seriously and personally the job voters in town have entrusted me to do, to return our schools to their once prestigious standing in this state. I joined this board to ensure the children of Watchung can excel as the whole child through academics, social engagement, and school athletics. This referendum gives us an opportunity to invest in that hope, not just by addressing many of the things that make schools function, like an HVAC system or abatement of asbestos tile, but by also addressing the amenities that make a school and our children thrive. I'm disappointed to see an item I was particularly energized by was left off this list: the improvement to the Valley View playground. A few weeks ago, my fourth grader and I shared a lunch at Bayberry's playground. Why she wanted to go there and not any other playground in town or the surrounding areas came down to one simple reason. It was at her school. She was proud of that. Now, I'm not saying we should build a slide or monkey bars at Valley View, far from that. But to have what amounts to an empty field sitting behind Valley View is, in my opinion, a disservice to those students. They deserve the same element of pride Bayberry kids have. In every way, academically, socially, and athletically, Valley View should be viewed as the opening act to their experience at Watchung Hills. We adults may at first see just dollar signs when reviewing the referendum proposal, but I would ask you to look further into it and see that by bringing to life the elements that truly enhance a child's life and sets them up for success at the next level, we are making an investment not just of dollars, but of promise and opportunity to our students. If I consider the positive outcome or the inspiration even one child may find in having an outdoor space that teaches them track and field, then to me, an investment of approximately $400,000 is worth it. And I would ask my fellow board members to consider adding to this proposal an addendum to do just that. Why am I in favor of this particular referendum? Well, in my pantry, you'll find a can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup. There's nothing wrong with it. It fills you up on a cold day. The soggy little carrots and limp noodles taste okay. It gets the job done. But compared to homemade chicken noodle soup, well, there you have fresh bits of pulled chicken, bigger chunks of carrot and celery swimming with wide egg noodles in the ever so perfectly seasoned broth. Big difference between the two. Which one sounds more appealing to you? An investment in both the necessities and amenities contained in this referendum can make us stand out, just like that homemade chicken noodle soup. There is not one person on this call that wouldn't benefit from that. Parents, taxpayers, teachers, staff. But there are a heck of a lot more that aren't on this call that would benefit as well. And those are the futures we have an obligation to enhance. Thank you.
Lori, I'd like to give an overview if I could.
Sure.
Okay, apologies to those of you who have been in prior board meetings and have heard a lot of this before, but I thought it would be helpful, and thank you for your comments, Michelle. I thought it would be helpful to give an overview of what we're actually proposing. So The last referendum was in the year 2002, coming up on 20 years. It was for $25 million at an interest rate of approximately 4%. Out of that $25 million, state grants aided to the extent of 21% of that amount. The scope, this was paid off, this bond was paid off in 2016, 5 years ago. And for the last 5 years, and I've been on the board for almost 3 now, we've seen infrastructure failing, which is past its useful life. Not only that, but to Michelle's point, actually, also the educational enhancements for first-class school system and district have been lagging behind those of our neighbors and those of the best schools in the state, which we aspire to be, and which was the case when I moved here 29 years ago. About 80% of this referendum is for infrastructure, and about 20% of it is for educational enhancements, which I think are every bit as important. Over 90% of this proposal qualifies for state aid. 6% does not, and 3 or 4% is a maybe, and we'll have to get that answer from the state should we move forward. Also, the amount of the state aid, as opposed to the grant for approximately 21% of the total amount back in 2002, the amount of state aid is approximately 34% this year. So all of this is, and again, you've heard this before from me, but the failure to act before now, I think has been, financially unsound, and it's cost the taxpayers of Watchung hundreds of thousands of dollars in state aid as we have replaced rooftop units, electrical infrastructure, computer infrastructure, things that could have been subject or would have been subject to state aid. We've borne the entire bill for. Out of every $100 worth, we've spent $100 instead of only 66. The other things, I think interest rates now are at an historic low. Delay will cost more. We'll either have to pay more money or we'll get less for the same amount of money. And then there's something I just have to mention. This would be, if we wanted what we have now, and we want, there would be more items on this list. For example, that playground that Michelle took her daughter to, and the STEM lab, were the result of the incredible philanthropy of the Bisignano family in town. I mean, without that, if we wanted the same facilities, this would be an $18 million referendum. I don't think that relying on the generosity of private citizens is a sustainable financial model for a school district. So the last thing I want to say is I take responsibility for the Valley View field probably not having the outcome you would like, and I am very open to doing something about it at this meeting. Just so you all know, we had 3 proposals for enhancing it. One was a track that was like an oval, sort of a half track, if you will, oval. The other was a 100-meter full track Um, just a straight one. And the third proposal was an exercise trail around the perimeter of the property. You know, the fact of the matter is the operations committee, you know, after rejecting a turf field for about $1,750,000, couldn't agree really on what the best use of the field would be. All three of the options, other than the turf field, all three of the options I gave you were, to Michelle's point, and I think she had the number right, about $400,000 more than the 75,000 we put in. So I would be perfectly supportive of increasing, you know, from 14.6 to 15 in order to put in the amount that we would need to make the Valley View Field, you know, an excellent facility that would flow from the commons that we're building in the courtyard through to a field that the children could get more enjoyment out of. And if the rest of the board feels that way, I think we can amend the resolution. Thank you, Dory. That's what I had to say.
I can offer my thoughts on this. First of all, thanks, Rich. I appreciate not just what you said here tonight in encapsulating all of this, but your willingness to collaborate outside of the committee and talk to me, and I think a few other board members who aren't on the committee, to share like questions and thoughts and maybe some concerns that we had. And I was really encouraged to see some movement on the number, because I think it was pretty obvious, I guess, that I was concerned about it trending skyward. So, you know, basically cut to the chase, I really support sending this to the state in its form, in the current form. I can get behind it. I think it'll be really interesting to see the state's determination on, you know, eligibility for debt service funding, especially in that maybe category that you just mentioned. Even though that's not that large, I think, you know, you just never know, and maybe there are surprises in even what we're anticipating. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes back. And I mean, that and stakeholder feedback before we take, you know, if I'm understanding correctly, like a final vote, once all the information is gathered, both from the state and from our stakeholders, community, taxpayers, basically constituents, should inform, you know, the board's final thinking on a total and final ballot question. And I echo sort of what I heard Michelle saying about not losing sight of the importance of hearing from constituents, you know, on the tax burden that this would place on them. So I think we're all conscious of that to a certain degree. You know, and I hope we're doing the forum. I don't know what you do in the COVID era, right? You used to have like big APR gatherings, like an input session, and it was moderated. And maybe we do a Google form this year, or some type of, or virtual, but some type of community engagement really should be done on something like this. Because it's in the end, it's the community and not board members who will ultimately have to approve it. So that input is really critical to me to hear in some type of formal way before we make that final vote. But like I said, I think this is a step in a process, and this is an appropriate time to take the next step, get the feedback from the state about what would be funded, start moving forward to put these into a presentation for the public. Beyond that, there's just a couple of, you know, listen, things have been moving fast. We had a meeting a week ago tonight. I know you had your meeting last night. I saw the updates, I saw the dollar changes. But you know, there are still some gray areas for me, I guess, between like what we talked about last week and this week. So I'd just like to quickly, you know, if we could, I just want to make sure I'm tracking correctly, like we can still discuss those with this being sent to the state. For example, I thought it was a great idea, Rich. And again, I truly appreciate the willingness to, you know, speak to board members individually with their concerns. But, you know, I had a lot of questions about the very round numbers around the security category. And I thought the idea to discuss that was proposed at the meeting last week was a good one, if that's still valid. I would like to have that discussion, with the small group of people, with the architects. I'd like to talk more about the fields. I definitely don't feel prepared tonight to add 400,000. I don't know if that includes the S30 plus 5% escalation cost, but I wasn't clear on the information that was sent this afternoon, if that included connecting the courtyard or learning commons to the field, even if it is left just, a field. So things like that. And then, again, sorry, but the bathrooms is still a huge gray area for me. It's kind of like the security category. It's a round number, but it's not really clear what the scope is. And even in one of my conversations, I think the second conversation I had with Rich, we both said, and I think Rich, you used the expression sharpen the pencils, that DRG could sharpen the pencils and get some detail, maybe provide more transparency. I know some of that came across in a PowerPoint, and I do see, where they've given proper examples of sort of like the lower level of the Bayberry Media Center. That's clearly not accessible. You shouldn't have to take a chairlift to get to an accessible restroom, putting one there. That's the kind of detail I think that would help illustrate, the need for the round numbers that are attached to that. So, and I want to say, because of my own confusion and some of the comments that came through last week, I did go back and because maybe I'm missing something, in the initial presentation that DRG gave to us, I think it was February 25th board meeting, there was PowerPoint presentation of infrastructure, and they did say, and it's right there on the tape, we're not renovating for ADA compliance, but to bring these, and I think they were talking about individual toilet rooms up to a nicer aesthetic. And they went on to say you don't have to do every single toilet room if you're renovating for aesthetic purposes. We're not saying you have to do all of them right away. So, I just feel like there is a discussion there to be had to provide clarity. So if we could do that, I think it would be helpful. But, by no means does that present any barrier in my mind to submitting this to the state, because the work is still there and we can determine the funding and the eligibility. And, I'd like to continue to, discuss all of these things, and speaking of discussion and speaking of ADA compliance and bathrooms, because I don't want to, hit a nerve at all, I would just really like to state explicitly, like clearly, I don't know a single board member or person really who doesn't support compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. As a school district, it's really non-negotiable. The compliance is mandatory, with the law is mandatory, and federal funding is dependent on it, on compliance with it. So, schools don't have any choice in this, and no one would suggest otherwise, that, we did. Everyone's in favor of increasing accessibility. And like I said, the example of the Bayberry Media Center bathroom is a great example. It was illustrated to the board clearly why it was needed. And then, so of course you support that. But to me, it was somewhat unclear all along, and still is, which bathrooms are more for aesthetic purposes, and they're a little old and outdated. And I get that. And I get that maybe we should do those too, because of that reason. But to me, as a board member, trustee in this district, to Michelle's point, we're stewards of the taxpayers' funds. And, I would just like to know, with distinction, where the distinction is between all of the work that's proposed, whether it's, for accessibility reasons, like I said, or if it's, really to renovate with aesthetics. So, nobody is advocating. I guess my point is, I just want to make really clear, this is not, in any way advocating against better accessibility for our students, for our staff. I think everyone wants more. We just have to ask questions about the scope. And that's, I do take slight offense to the fact that, the insinuation that that's not appropriate for us to discuss in our meetings. I mean, these are our meetings. They're open to the public by law, but it's the only chance we get to talk together. I mean, we're literally prohibited by law from talking together outside of this format. So not only is it our right to talk together about this, I consider my obligation as a board member. We're stewards of the public trust. So, they're just inquiries. And it's funny, like George's kickoff to the budget reminded me of when he first came to this district, how inspired I was by his sort of summary of the values in the district, that it was a culture of inquiry and collaboration and like mutual respect and equity and inclusion. Those are all things that, and he even said, I jotted it down, we're expected to model those behaviors. So, accusing people when they're offering a viewpoint, just to try and get through some of the vagaries that are presented in these long spreadsheets that we're, all volunteering to look through and digest and feel adequately prepared to make a decision on. I really don't think it's good to be criticized for just inquiring and collaborating, which, like I said, I'm very, very happy that we were able to collaborate, through Rich with the committee and ask some of these questions and, discuss the items in this referendum. Like I said, I have no problem submitting it to the state. I totally agree that that's the right thing to do now. So, guys, when I was a parent 6 years ago, first looking at board meetings, there was never one sentence of discussion. Everything was voted on yes, unanimously. Everything passed unanimously. And, a lot of us ran for the board because that didn't produce the best outcome, and so we can't begin as a community to criticize people for having diversity of viewpoint or for inquiring about board business that's before us for a vote. And I think, I'm not going to nitpick any other committee business, but this referendum is, as Rich said, it's a once in a 20-year thing, or, it hasn't been contemplated for 20 years. So we owe it all to each other and to the constituents to ask the questions. And I really don't think it's fair, to get criticism for asking for clarity and transparency in the numbers. So anyway, I'm a yes on this. Thank you for listening.
I just wanted to kind of steer us back to what Mrs. Poussin said about Valley View, particularly about the field over at Valley View. I definitely do support that something needs to be added on to the Valley View field. I appreciate all of the work that the operations committee has put into this to finding something that will fit our needs. I just think it's a missed opportunity if we don't do something over there. As I've said before in other meetings, our children are going up to that high school. They have everything. And I'm not saying we have to have everything, but all of the sending districts have a little something at their middle school, and it really is just very desolate over there. So I definitely do support us, doing something about that over at the Valley View field.
Would it be appropriate to ask for an amendment then to put that number in that we had and decide amongst the, again, this is not anything final, but I think if the 4.6 million, 14.6 million becomes 15 million with the intention that we pick the right solution for the middle school, I think that would be a good resolution to this if the other board members agree.
Rich, I'd be supportive of that. I think it makes.
I'm sorry. I don't know what we're talking about. Is there a slide on what is it? What's the work that would be added? Do you have any
There are slides. There's 3 different choices. These slides have been around.
I can pull it up if it's not the track that didn't fit. It's not the linear track.
It's those 3. If you look at the playing fields attachment, it would be, and I said that, we couldn't really settle on any of them, but they were all basically the same costs. So I think that amount of money, we can do something that's really special there. It was the 100-meter sprint track, the 50-meter sprint track, that's the oval, and the nature fitness trail, all come in at the same price. And so if there's a better idea or we choose amongst one of those, I think that's what I've heard in the comments.
Rich, would the 75 that was added in your committee meeting last night come off the 400? Is it a swap and it would be really 325 added to
Well,
that?
I think it would be an additional 400,000, Jess.
I wasn't gonna ask because I feel like it's nitpicking, but what was the 75 from last night for?
The 75 was for the extension of the courtyard so that there's no parking between the courtyard and the field, which I felt after going out there and walking, it would be dangerous situation, moving the basketball court and putting balustrades in, extending the outdoor learning center.
Is, so from what I understand, Rich is in favor, Joe, Michelle, Jen, myself, any other board members in favor?
Adam,
Okay, so is there any other discussion or should we move this along?
Just to clarify, it's 450, you're saying that that would just be the kind of the dollar amount that you would be working around to work on whatever you're planning on putting on Valley View, the field, right?
Correct. It's 400 additional. So the resolution as it's currently written, and this is Lisa Gorev from Willett Spitzer can tell us that this is not a binding resolution with respect to the actual amount, but it would go from 14.6 to 15 in the resolution.
Okay.
So DRG's estimate does include the 30% soft costs and 5% escalation costs, or is that on top of?
That would be on top of that. But Rich, just so you know, regardless of what you do, that last slide that we gave you, the $50,000 to replace a softball field, that would come off, our other overall number. I mean, that's part of the $75,000. So, I guess basically your additional soft costs would, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but it would be roughly covered in the $15 million amount.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know, 35.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. It's so much, there's so much minutia, so I don't want to, but I mean, I don't think it's a wash between 75 and 35% of 400. I mean, isn't that more like 120?
Is there any other discussion? Oh, Lisa, are you trying to talk? I think you might be muted.
Unmute yourself.
There you go.
Sorry, thank you. It's nice to see you all. I just want to give a brief summary. You all have very, important issues, and the numbers are very important, and you've obviously worked very hard to get to this point. But I want to explain in kind of like layman's terms what this resolution does. This resolution simply gives DRG the authorization to put the applications together for the scope of projects that you approve. The number and the numbers and the soft costs that you're referring to, it's really an estimate. So when you give DRG this authorization to prepare these applications, they're going to do a lot more detail. That 15 million is just an estimate, which does not even create a budget at this point. DRG does their work, they submit their applications to the Department of Education. It's only once you hear back from the Board of Education that it's time for the board, that at that point, the board has another chance to dissect, pull apart, and consider the projects that they want to submit to the voters at referendum. So while you might have a $15 million in this number, in this referendum, in this resolution, the referendum could be for 14.8, 14.9, 15.1. We don't know that yet. DRG still has a fair amount of work to do. This is their best estimate at this point. Is that right, Frank?
Correct. And can I just say we're more comfortable with the numbers we've given you for the HVAC and in the interior renovations because we have comparable projects. We have comparable square footage costs of recent projects. The issue with trying to come up with a really good number for the fields is that typically if you're going to do a football field and a track, it's your standard, 100-yard football field with the 6-lane track, with your 100-meter, track, with your, starting blocks in your runoff area. And you're trying to sort of customize something for this very small site. So it's really tough to, come up with something that we're really comfortable with at this point. And the fact that, the property does start to, in the corners, as you're walking away from the school towards the lake, there's a pretty big drop off in the topography. So, it means dealing with drainage, retaining walls, but depending on what you do, that's going to affect how big of a retaining wall, how much soil do you have to bring in. So we're trying to give you an overall number, but like Lisa said, until you decide what you want to do with that, it's tough to come up with a really good number. I mean, if you tell us you only want to spend $350,000 on that, we can design something within that budget. Now, whether it's going to be the track, we're just not sure. And Michelle, just, to something that we've brought up with the administration is, it might be wise to have somebody from, the track and field at the high school, reach out to them, because I know I'm not a track person, but I remember when I was in school, the people that ran track, they were always talking about pacing, when you pick up your speed, how you enter, a turn. And if you do something that's too small, I likened it to the difference between, you have kids that play on a t-ball field for a couple of years, and then they go to a regulation Little League field, and they just don't quite know what to do because they're overwhelmed. So, my suggestion was just get somebody who's a little bit more knowledgeable about training for track and field, and just see what would work best. Would a smaller size track work here? Would the fitness trail, could that be something that could just be used for general health? It might seem like it's more for cross country and not, running, like 100-meter and, quarter miles and things like that. Just a suggestion, so that whatever you do is really going to benefit, the majority of the students.
But again,
And I appreciate that suggestion, Frank. I think there needs to be some creativity here. I think there needs to be some outreach. Again, to look out at an empty field is kind of a metaphor for how much thought has been put into these districts prior to the last few years. And
Yeah.
I don't want that to be the kind of the takeaway from this, that we could have done something and we didn't.
Oh, believe me, I get it. I mean, when I was really impressed with, the playgrounds behind Bayberry, and then you come over to Valley View and there's really not much there for the students. So, like I said, we will work with you, whatever you feel is going to be best there. We can certainly come up with something that will hopefully make, everybody happy, and it will be used by, a majority of the students.
So again, this resolution is to submit the largest possible scope of projects to the Department of Education, so that you can get their response, their approval, and their determination of how much they're going to contribute to each of these projects.
And once the funding determination is made by the state and shared with the district, if something is a surprise and not funded at all, and the district decides, well, then we don't want to do that if we're not getting the benefit, as to Rich's point, and he's made this many times, I think it's very valid. It's like getting a kickback on the work you're doing. Why would you pay your own money if you're getting the state to fund a portion of it? But that becomes kind of a moot point if you're not getting any funding. So I imagine there's a process by which the board eliminates certain items if they don't meet, or, say the public says, you get strong feedback that a certain element is too much to bear, or that a certain threshold, would be too much to bear, and you have to start paring down. Are all of those items, Lisa, potential ways that you may end up, that's
Sure,
right?
because this board as a whole still has another step, and that's to determine the scope of projects that's going to be submitted to the voters at the referendum. Right, absolutely.
But if you don't submit it in your initial submission, which we were supposed to be approving tonight, you have to go back to square one. Got it.
Exactly.
I would add, just quickly, that 30 plus 5% of 400 is an additional 140. You'd be at 540. It's not 50,000 or something, as was stated. So you'd be above 15,
Is there any other discussion? Okay, so I'm presuming we're amending the amount. Is that correct, Rich?
That's what I would recommend. I would make a motion to amend the amount to $15 million and consider the Valley View field improvements. And as Ms. Gorab, our attorney, has advised, that number could go up or down depending on what the board decides, as could others.
Rich, Pepe, do we, like structurally in the meeting, do we have a motion on the table already for us to go and vote on this? What do you recommend?
So we now have a motion to amend it. I think we need a second for that, a vote on that. Then we can come back and vote on the amended original motion.
Okay, so is there a second?
Yes,
Jen.
Michelle.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
And this is to vote on the amendment to increase the number to 15 million. Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia,
yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Mrs. Posehn,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Harvey?
Yes.
Okay, so the amendment passes. So now we are back to the motion to approve the amended motion on the agenda, changing the 14.5 million number to 15 million.
Okay, and we already got a second on that in
Plus-
the discussion. So can
Plus
we have a
the
roll
other-
call? Oh, sorry.
Plus the other item.
Right, plus the transportation item. Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure, just to clarify, so we're now voting on both operations items, the the authorization for certain actions as amended and the amendment addendum to the transportation jointure. Mr. Barbella,
Yes.
Mr. Buccarelli,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingracia,
Yes.
Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mrs. Murad,
Yes.
Mrs. Posehn,
Yes.
Mrs. Scharf,
Yes.
Mrs. Harvey.
Yes.
Okay, so both motions pass.
Okay, there's nothing
Gloria,
under,
can I just say thank you to all of you for taking this initial step, because it really is, as mentioned earlier, an initial step towards actualizing this vision for the district and for the kids of Watchung. So thank you, and thank you for carefully considering everything and all the time we spent over the last 6 months, 8 months, working towards this. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alexis.
hold on, I gotta get to my other screen. Sorry, guys, I'm just tired this evening. I apologize. We don't have anything under curriculum or policy. So we're gonna move into comments from the public. And this is for any item. So please remember to please state your name and address before speaking.
Okay, Mrs. Harvey, we do have one comment that was emailed. I'm going to read that now. From Geraldine Lawrence, Dear Board of Education, thank you for never losing sight of getting our kids back to school and working hard and finding ways to get them back. While they aren't fully back just yet, the extended days, 5 days a week, is so good for our kids and is such a welcomed change. While I can't wait for the email to come that the school day is back to its regular schedule, I did want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for that time, attention, and care you spend volunteering for the betterment of our kids. Thanks again, Geraldine Lawrence. And at this time, if there are any members of the public, you may raise your hand. Aaron, it looks like we have one. Mrs. Newsom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Hi, good evening, everyone, to Mr. Alexis, to the board, to everyone under the sound of my voice. I just wanted to just say thank you to the board just for everything you guys have done, to help us move forward, with this referendum, for the board and the admins having the vision to, invest in our schools and most importantly, enhancing our children's experiences. I mean, for all the time, I know you guys put a lot of endless time into this, for you being fiscally responsible, and what has been agreed upon tonight. I just wanted to say thank you. Did you hear anything I said?
We did. Thank you.
Yes,
Very much.
thank you. Sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. I apologize.
No problem. No problem.
I think Mr. Baker had sent a comment in as well, Mr. Pepe, or a question.
Mr. Vakos, I believe he emailed the Board of Ed. He did not send it to me as a comment. I don't know, Mrs. Harvey, did you read that?
Yes, but I believe too, if there's comments or emails, they have to be within a certain time period before the board meeting.
Okay.
Are there any other comments from the public? If I could, I know that some community members just got on, and I just wanted to reiterate what I said at the beginning, since some of you were not on, that we just wanted to thank the teachers and the nurses for all of their work this week, for every week that you guys do, but notably for this week, since it is Teacher and Nurse Appreciation. And we just want to thank you for your service and all the hard work you put in. And, thank you for everything you do.
Amen.
If there's no other comments from the public, can I have a motion to adjourn?
May I just ask a question, Rich? What is the cutoff for public comments? I really wasn't aware of that, and I too was surprised that that wasn't read. What's
It's 24 hours prior to the meeting is what the announcement says, but also I didn't, that email wasn't sent to me. So the instructions are to send something to my email address. It's up to 24 hours prior to the meeting.
All right. You were on it though. I mean, it was sent to all, wasn't it?
Actually, I wasn't on the original. I think Mr. Alexis shared it with me.
You were copied on it, Rich.
Was I?
Yeah, just 2 hours ago.
Okay. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you for joining us this evening. This is a meeting of the Watchung Borough Board of Education, and we are adjourned. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good night.